Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast. What's happening, all my woods people? We're chilling in E-Town right now, and it's past my bedtime, KC.
Me too.
Dude, are you tired?
Yeah, I got up at 4:30 this morning.
And worked till 8?
Worked till 8, yeah. Hunted from 4:30 till... I got my vehicle at 11 to leave that place, which is kind of a strange thing. Just I have late deer movement over there, so I have to stay in the stand late. And then had about an hour and a half for lunch, and then got to work, and here we are.
Here we are. Have you eaten dinner yet?
I did.
I have not.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
You might need another cough drop.
That's why I'm eating cough drops. Yeah, exactly. I'm starving, so I'm eating cough drops.
Yeah.
So, you've had a couple of pretty good hunts recently.
I have.
Compared to our normal Texas hunts.
I have had some good hunts. I've been really sticking to the permission stuff here lately, close to home on private. Mostly because I'm trying to get this house finished, and I don't have time to run, 2, 3, 4 hours across the state to go to, a public parcel when I can drive 10 minutes up the road and hunt my permissions place. Not to mention, I've had 2 shooter bucks show up in daylight in the last week over
that
here.
Helps.
That really helps your motivation to go somewhere.
Well, the weather hasn't really been something that...
And here's the thing, dude. I've got a theory.
Okay.
All right. This is groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of. I'm being a touch tongue-in-cheek, but I also really believe this.
I believe it.
I don't think people talk about humidity enough with how it affects deer. I think that everybody is so Midwest-oriented or, There's
so much media coming from the Midwest.
Yeah, coming from that area. Well, it's always 40% humidity there. It always feels good. Around here, this happened this week. 60 degrees one day felt totally different than it did the next day, and it was because the humidity the day before was 45 and the next day it was 80. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes a huge difference to the deer too. Yeah. It's got to. I can
we
tell
feel it
in this stand. Like the other day I saw 3 bucks. Who knows, maybe more would have come in if one hadn't spotted me in the tree. That's another story. But and today it was much more humid and I only had 1 deer come in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can deer sweat?
I don't believe they can.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's very few animals that actually do sweat.
So I wonder how the humidity affects them then. You know what I mean? Like, for us, it feels warmer in my opinion, but is that, I don't know, like...
Oh, you're saying that perspiration is the key to humidity not working, and because your perspiration is not evaporating, then the humidity, that's why you feel warmer?
No, I'm just saying, I guess... I don't like humidity because it makes me sweat like freaking crazy. You know what I'm saying? I walk out and I'm just sweating every time I move.
Are you always sweating that much, but you evaporate when it's low humidity?
Maybe. I don't know.
I think that's how it works. I don't know. But I didn't go much past AMP 1, so I don't know that much about this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that's correct.
Yeah, maybe you're right. but it's something to think about. Maybe we need to find somebody to get on the podcast.
We
about
do.
that.
We need to get somebody like anatomically talk about deer.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
But I feel you on that, man. And feels. I mean, I'll just say this: until last night. Last night I seven-folded my whole year's deer sightings.
Yeah.
And last night it was not really humid.
Yeah.
And I've hunted a lot of humid days, and that may have something to do with it, you know.
Yeah.
So
I think it makes a difference, man.
Yeah.
We're gonna just kind of maybe keep that in our minds.
yeah.
And then just see how deer movement's affected by that.
Yeah. Well, I had a couple shooters show up recently too. I checked a trail camera today in the middle of the day. And when I got out of the stand last night, about 45 minutes later, a buck that is a for-sure shooter showed up.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know. It's starting to come on, but 45 minutes prior to that, I had to jump out of the stand and spook 7 does to get out.
Yeah, man. Things are starting to happen. I mean, it's that time of year. It's almost like it snuck up on us. That. It's almost November.
Yeah.
Right now. We had like those cold fronts early in October, and then it's been such mediocre weather ever since then. It's not bad weather as far as like living as a human. It's very nice, mild days, but like we need some cold fronts or some fronts to push through, and just at least like a day or two here and there.
Our fronts, we had so much rain, dude.
We did.
Like the humidity and the rain. For like 3 weeks, I couldn't get my windshield to I couldn't get it to clear up,
There's an inch of water in the floorboard of my vehicle because I think it all came from like it raining so much on those days and getting in and out of the vehicle, just the water off my shoes. Has that much water in there.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
crazy. I don't know. I got to get a shot back after it or something, but yeah.
It's hard to get that to evaporate probably inside.
No kidding.
Well, if you guys haven't heard already, you've been living under a rock, but we're doing a giveaway. It's an Exodus Trek trail camera, and we've been using our Exodus on these permission properties that we have. Mm-hmm. We're only using the Exodus right now. And, well, I just put out a different brand camera just because it was something I had laying around. But that's my primary camera. That's your primary camera, and they've done really cool videos. We've got some really cool videos.
Yeah. And honestly, we both have testament right now of how video makes a huge difference as opposed to just taking pictures or even burst.
Yeah.
Because you get a much better concept of how the deer are using the area.
Right.
It's unreal. And then you get to see, like, I have one buck in particular that I thought was a 3-year-old, but because of the way he is acting around other 3-year-olds, I have suspicion that he might be a 4-year-old. He's a touch bigger. But just because he is a more dominant figure,
right.
I think that he is an older buck.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be a shooter just because I would like to see him get a little older. But anyways, it's just like little subtle details like that you get to see in video.
Yeah.
You get to see deer's personality. Like I've got another buck that I call Cautious. Actually, he's the buck that was in that video that we just released.
Okay.
The 2-year-old, he's a big 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? And I call him Cautious because he constantly picks up corn, sticks his head up, and looks around 7 directions.
Dude,
like
he
the
was.
whole time. It doesn't matter if there's other deer around or not. He does it on the way in, on the way out. Just his nature, you know. So and then I've got other deer that are just so carefree.
Yeah.
You
snuck in there on Cautious today, didn't you? Or was that yesterday?
Yesterday.
Dude.
Yeah, yesterday. Did the
Make
hanging
you feel
hunt
good?
live. It did make me feel good. It was cool, man.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the Trek giveaway.
sorry.
No, Exodus Trek trail camera is what we're giving away. I'm sure many of you have heard this, and I know a lot of you have already given reviews, so thank you for that. We've got some really cool ones, and one that even made us laugh pretty good. All you have to do is give us a review on iTunes, 5-star review. And just, we
be
prefer
sure
that
and
you say
type something and put your name on there, otherwise we don't know who you are. So leave us a 5-star review, and that time is running out on that because this is going to release on the 25th, right? Something like that.
I think so.
And we're going to announce this on the 30th.
Yeah. So you'll hear from us. The next time you hear from us, we'll be giving it away, right?
Oh, you're right. Oh my goodness.
So this is the last time you get warned about the Trek trail camera giveaway. Make sure you search the podcast on your app. You have to search it even if you're subscribed to us. Search it, scroll down to where it says reviews, give us a review, 5 stars, and say what you want, and you are in the running for it. And honestly, odds are pretty good to win a $150 trail camera right now.
No kidding.
You know what
I'm
saying?
about to make another account. So, yeah, and then make sure the only place we're going to announce the winner of this thing is on the Big Buck Breakdown on October the 30th.
Yeah.
So make sure you listen to that episode.
And it is a big buck.
It is a big buck. It's a ginormous buck.
It's a ginormous buck from one of our good buddies who shall not be named. But, yeah, so check that out. Check out the I don't remember, something about a big 2-year-old buck or whatever. It's the video of that cautious buck you were talking about. That's on our YouTube channel now. And subscribe so you can see what we're doing this fall and winter, man, because we're going to be posting a lot of content, and we're going to try to keep it good content, stuff with deer in it, mostly. I've been trying, like I said, I've had several hunts without a deer, so you guys haven't seen it, really, any of that footage yet, and I don't think you will, because I don't want to torture you too bad. But anyway, is there anything else going on, man? I'm hunting in the morning.
Oh, dude, good luck.
I know, and
we're feeling good. Like right now, you and I both are like, it could happen tomorrow every time we hunt.
Dude, I'm telling you, I checked the camera like maybe 2-3 days ago, and then I checked it today during the middle of the day because I thought I might go this evening if there was something worth, showing me or whatever that I needed to. And there was like so much more buck action this last pull, and it was only 2 days worth. And so anyway, I'm starting to, now that I saw some deer there, I'm starting to figure it out. That's one thing we've kind of talked about is like, the both of us are hunting a pretty similar area, and it's pretty residential overall. Lots of traffic, lots of county roads, and that kind of thing. And it's so interesting how these deer are using soft spots where humans can't really see them during the day to move, and even during the night. But there's like farms and dogs and chickens and stuff all over the place, and guys mowing their yard, and these deer are still finding places that are soft spots to move through. And it's interesting because what you look at as being like the main route that this deer should travel from this big wooded property into my property isn't always the case. You know what I mean?
It's not so much about cover as it is just where they feel the most comfortable.
Yeah, staying away from humans.
Yeah, and normally, like what we've learned throughout our public, adventures is that those two are usually one and the same, and it's not that way on this private stuff, man. It's different. And it's really weird that it's that much of a difference. You know, like it's a strange thing.
Yeah, I know, dude. It's nuts, and we're starting to figure that stuff out, but it's one of those things like, sorry if you guys are hearing some big monster trucks. We're in East Texas, so we have to have a muffler, modified muffler. But anyway, but it's really interesting. And I think that as we figure these out, once we do, like, we're going to be in the money. We're going to understand it, but it may take a few years to figure out all the places they're coming from. Hopefully we get to hunt these properties for a few years, you know.
Hopefully so.
But on the podcast today, we have, man, this is one of my favorites.
Dude, you've been looking forward to this one for about 2 years.
Yeah, I know. And we actually did this podcast a while back, but we wanted to save it for a pre-rut podcast so everybody could get all their rut tactics in line going into the, what everybody's going to take as their rutcation, I guess. And this is Jeff Sturgis from Whitetail Habitat Solutions. Jeff, man, he knows something about everything, it seems like, I mean, the guy talks about, modifying your property to be a big buck paradise and this and that, to hunt well or to be habitat for deer or whatever it might be. And you're like, oh, well, he's, it's cool stuff. It maybe doesn't pertain to me as a guy who doesn't have land and who's young right now. I'll log that in my mind or whatever. But then all of a sudden you start digging deeper into Jeff and you understand this guy has killed big bucks on public land.
Oh, yeah, and hunts public land every year all the time.
Yeah. It's
crazy. And I tell you what else, Whitetail Habitat Solutions is a good follow.
Oh, yeah.
Because that dude, okay, there's these people that put out articles and you read it and you're like, I didn't really learn anything. It just was a deer hunting story. He puts out stuff that, every time I'm like, I need to see what this is all about.
Yeah, I know.
It's good quality information, man. So I'm ready to, get that in verbal form because I'm not a great reader. So.
yeah, that's how I feel. Like I am better at watching a YouTube video and letting Jeff tell me.
That's right.
So, and that's a good thing. He's really got a great YouTube channel. So y'all subscribe to his channel, and while you're there, subscribe to ours. And I'm ready to get Jeff on the podcast.
Let's call him up.
Let's do it. All right, so on the phone now we have Jeff Sturgis of Whitetail Habitat Solutions. Jeff, I was going to ask you how your vacation went, but apparently it has not ended yet.
Well, it's kind of extended. We had, first off, great to be on the podcast. I'm looking forward to the discussion. But, yeah, the vacation ended with, on the way home, the transmission going out. So I put a lot of miles in my truck. I don't know. It's a 2015 with 140,000 miles. But it shouldn't have gone out yet. My last truck lasted almost 400,000. So I'm waiting for that thing to get fixed, and we're supposed to be back Sunday, and I think I'm going to get back on Thursday. So
yeah, well, I guess I'm lucky, but mine's got probably about 190 on it right now. And I pulled out the other day onto the highway early in the morning. Luckily, there wasn't many people out, and it just basically said something about my StabiliTrak, and then it shut off basically. And as we're going down the highway, I had to pull into a bank and turn it off for about 5 minutes. Yeah, it's having some electrical issues, I think. But I'm hoping that I don't.
Pain, but
I'm hoping that if I do end up in the same boat as you, that I'm on vacation as well, instead of I need to be working and I can't get my truck to work.
Yeah, and that's a cool thing too. I just finished writing a blog and published a YouTube video today. So that was at least do some whitetail work while I'm on the road and motel, wherever I'm at.
So you're speaking about it, but explain for the listener that may not know much kind of what you do.
It's kind of hard to describe, but what I do is I design whitetail properties around the country. And so since 2000, I started the business in 2005. And since that time, I've been to right around 700 clients in 25 states.
Wow.
And so what I do is I go to the property, help them with their timber management, give them suggestions, and give them a plan and design to what to do with their timber, how to make bedding areas, how to make travel corridors, how to install water holes if they need them or not, how to put in food plots based on their equipment and their resources, what they should plant based on their location, and really wrap that up into a complete design that, you're really the highest goal is to attract as many whitetails to your land as possible without you spooking them when you go out to hunt. And so what I find, it doesn't matter if we're hunting on public land or private land, or I'm designing private land parcels and whitetail setups, but hunting and how you hunt is always the lowest hole in the bucket, if that makes sense. You can't overcome sloppy hunting efforts or poor hunting practices with the best habitat or the best whitetail parcel, in the country.
Mm-hmm. Man, that sounds like one of the most rewarding jobs that you could have. I think that's.
Oh yeah, it's fun, and I have a list about 200 long of different ideas that I can carry over when I write articles. So I have about 700 articles online out of my site, and I think about 150 YouTube videos, and that'll increase by 100 on both ends or more. And then I have 4 books out too. And so what I learned on whitetail parcels directly flows into my writings or the videos, or certainly, my books that are out there too. So it's, a lot of fun. It's basically whitetail is all 365 days a year. But of course, like we were talking earlier, I really like to go fishing too.
Yeah.
So it's been a nice, relaxing change of pace.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of cool that you have that dynamic of being able to kind of do whitetails for a living, but fish, kind of still have that outdoor aspect of vacation time, or whatever, that rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
So your YouTube channel has some pretty interesting stuff on it. I am a big YouTube watcher, and I think I saw a video where you were talking about roadkill and using that to understand whitetail travel patterns. That's pretty interesting. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
And if, listeners out there, if you think about it, there's always those places in your neighborhood, your city, your county where you see deer hit on the road. And there's a reason. They're always crossing based on funnels, fence rows, food sources, bedding areas. And especially now where we can get a drone and fly over the top, where you can easily look at Google aerial photos and get a lot of detail, there's a reason why they're crossing. And I think you can directly relate that to whether you're hunting on public land or even how you're setting up your properties on private land as far as how deer move and where they typically move. And a lot of it just boils down to habitat change, habitat lines, and, wanting to eat in point B and travel from bedding in point A. And so trying to go back and forth. But yeah, I like that. And so that's what I've always done. And driving up and down I-75 in Michigan or over into Wisconsin and down, anywhere I drive for clients, it's always interesting to see when you see a roadkill, look around a little bit and just kind of pay attention and see why that deer was killed there. Not just that's a dead deer on the side of the road. I think sometimes they can paint a little picture, a little better picture.
Man, I eat that stuff up. Like anything that's different than what you have seen or heard over and over again, whether it be reading it in an article or in a magazine or on a podcast. I mean, some of the things that we hear, it's almost like just a regurgitation of something that's been happening or being told for the last 20 years or whatever. And I love stuff like that. That's just out of the box thinking. I feel like that's a great way to be in general, but then also that's a great way to be a successful hunter, is to kind of think out of the box and realize things that your normal hunter may not realize.
Yeah, I think sometimes you're looking at that a deer does this certain thing, and we know that, but then you always have to ask why. And so when you ask why is when you start to really learn. Yeah. Not just accepting that a whitetail does this, travels to food in the evening. Why does he do that? Right. And or beds, mature buck beds in a remote location. Why does he not bed with the doe family groups, and why? And then you can learn a lot about whitetails by just asking that simple question.
So you do own a piece of property, and that's in Michigan, I guess, or?
I owned at one time 260 acres in Michigan.
Okay.
Right now I lease 3 parcels in southwest Wisconsin.
Okay.
So I don't own any land right now, but I have private land that I work on, quite a bit depending on which one, which landowner in southwest Wisconsin. So that allows me to get a lot of, and I had a lease before that for 12 years in Wisconsin before these 3 that I have. So I've been hunting there for, this will be the 17th season coming up on private land down there.
Wow, that's cool. It's nice to have that history. So you're going to hunt public land this year, though. Am I correct?
Yeah, for the last 6 years, I've hunted public land in Ohio. I really want to go back to my roots in Michigan. I love some of my northern areas where I've hunted, where you're walking out 45 minutes to an hour out in the swamps. I hunted Pennsylvania public land for 17 years. I always think about going back there too. And so I don't know where I'll end up on public land, but that's the beauty of public land is you can basically, private land is a lot of work. If you're doing it right, putting your land together, you're trying to condense hundreds of acres, sometimes thousands of acres into a couple 100 acre down to a 20 acre package, trying to really fit a lot and make that parcel seem a lot larger. But on public land, you just show up and might require a lot of boot time, but I will hunt public land somewhere this year, and just haven't decided fully where yet.
Yeah. What's the drive to go hunt in Pennsylvania like you have?
Pennsylvania is about 10, 11 hours right around there for me to get over into that area. I hunt in the northeast area up in the hills, pretty close to New York. In fact, we go through New York and then drop down just into New York, maybe an hour and a half, and then drop down to the south.
So do you have a reason that you hunt there though? Is that, is it the challenge, the amount of deer? What's the reason you keep going over there?
My, Michelle was my first wife, and we, married in 93, and I started hunting with her family right off the bat. And so I hunted there for 17 years, and it was an annual, we hunted in the same cabin. I brought friends with me sometimes. My brother hunted with me. And sometimes there were up to 18 guys in camp. And so they had a rich history there where they actually shot their 200th whitetail or 200th buck. I think it was back in 2007, right around there.
Wow.
They had a long history of hunting there for over 40 years.
Wow.
they're really like hunting in the hills of Pennsylvania and the public land, and so that's what got me started there, and I really love it out there. And so it's kind of like I miss some of those interior benches and points and kind of that mid-level elevation that you go all the way back before walking 700 feet in elevation, drop back down the backside. And those are some of my favorite areas to hunt, kind of a rural, remote area.
Yeah, man, that's interesting. We don't have a ton of elevation here. And most of the places that I've hunted, we haven't had a ton of elevation change unless it's elk in Colorado or New Mexico. And so it's an interesting thing to me because I feel like that wind is so unpredictable there in some of those places, or at least it would be for me. That would be intimidating.
It is, and so I started kind of cutting my teeth on that in '93. And then, of course, where I hunt in Wisconsin, there's about 500-foot changes in elevation. So pretty big changes. In fact, some of the stands I go to right now are a half hour plus, and you walk uphill the entire time to get there. So I really get in shape during the hunting season. I'm a little out of shape right now. But it really, what's great about hills is to me, what I've seen anywhere is that hills, given the same number of hunters and similar percentages of cover versus ag land or woods, that hills help push up the buck age structure. They help hide bucks. They help separate hunters so you're not hunting it all in one location. They help produce more habitat because a lot of times you can't plant on the steep faces and sides and interior benches, points, draws, and so you get some increases in cover. But really, and then those winds, what I like about hills is you can cheat the wind. You can't cheat the wind on flat ground. If it's coming out of the northwest, whipping through a woodlot, it's going to be northwest. And the only exception might be a heavy line of conifer or something that might steer it like a berm. But other than that, in hill country, you can actually cheat the wind. You can play a lot of games with the wind, and I really enjoy doing that.
Mm-hmm. So are you looking for, like, say, specific saddles or, I guess, hills that jut out into a bottom or whatever that allow you to cheat the wind like that?
Yeah, there's several things that happen is in the morning, and probably right around 75% of my top 25 bucks, let's say, have been shot in the morning.
Really?
And the thing about in the morning is it allows you to hunt high, and as long as those whitetails are below you, generally you're safe because the thermals are always going up in the morning. And you're getting a strong lift in the morning too, all the way, as long as those temperatures are changing, the thermals are going up. And so that's why I hike a lot of times up high, and I wait till pre-rut to do that. And you're basically getting on top of whitetails that are down in ag land or food plots, hundreds of yards below, sometimes a half mile, and you're waiting for those deer to come back up to you in those bedding areas. And if you're down low, it makes it pretty tough because that wind swirls. So then I hunt on the outside of points with good wind flow from either side, where I can predict when my wind's going to fall in the evening and blow until it falls. And so a lot of times I'm hunting on the outside of points, low, and then I'm hunting high on benches, points, wherever the deer movement dictates, up high.
Mm-hmm.
In the morning.
Does the barometer affect how strong those thermals are?
I haven't found that it does, other than the barometer, usually when the barometer is low, for example, there's a lot of other things going on that will affect it. For example, east winds are a lot lighter. So sometimes you find that east wind or no wind with an approaching front, or one that's just coming through and it's really calm, keeps those thermals down, and there's not a real big change in the morning hours that you would expect. And so I'm hunting a lot of high pressure days, and the barometric pressure would be high, and then you're getting a lot of good lift, but you're getting a lot of good whitetail movement then, it seems like, in that cleaner, colder air on the backside of a front. So a lot of, I'm not sure if it's exactly the factor of the barometric pressure or a combination of the rain, the dew point, everything else that's going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do see some correlations with that.
And it's cool because, we all hear about high barometer means good deer movement anyway. So it's good whenever,
right.
It also plays in your favor as far as wind goes. We have a stand, we don't have a lot of terrain change here, but every little bit counts. And there's a place where the if you've got a solid north wind, it can kind of come across an opening, and then it hits about I don't know, what do you say, 12-foot of elevation change
Probably
right
not
there?
even that, quite.
Yeah, maybe not even that, but it's just enough to kind of kick it up. And then on a high barometer day, we can sit in our stand, release a milkweed pod, and it goes straight up in there. And
that's
just
pretty cool.
straight up. And
it's like hitting a jump.
Yeah, it's so cool because deer that are downwind just walk right by, not even think that we're there. And it's neat how you can find those kind of places, but it takes a ton of work, or in our case, just some luck, because that was the only tree to put a stand in at that point, and it worked out well. But earlier you talked about how it might take a lot of boot time or whatever to figure out some places like this. And I was going to ask, what's your strategy when you do pull up to a place? It sounds like, you put a lot of weight on what you can see and find out from the ground there.
Well, it's boot time, meaning like, we're in the north in the UP where I used to hunt. There was a huge percentage of tag alder swamp marsh where there was not a lot of deer movement, not a lot of daytime holding cover. And then you had a high percentage of spruce swamp, which has zero food in it. And then you had a high percentage in the upland areas of mature timber that was federal land. And so, and that didn't contain a lot of deer either. So what I would do is I'd take a large area like that, especially when I first started hunting it, and I'd X out all the big common areas. So you take out the tag alder, take out the hardwoods, take out the spruce stands, and then you check all those lines in between. So where all those habitat features met or meet. So you have change in elevation, change in habitat type, and in a lot of those areas where you have multiple habitat features, rivers, if you add in there, or creeks, beaver ponds, then that's where food sources would take shape, because it was the most diverse area of habitat with a lot of habitat features coming together. So basically you could X out 95% of all the acres. And then it might be that you're checking that spot a half mile over there, that one 3/4 mile over there, that one a mile back, but you're really just Xing out a lot of the habitat that really didn't look attractive, and you're trying to find as many features coming together in one spot, and then just purely scouting those areas. And you'd see a relationship. You'd see I was looking for old signs. Old sign's almost better than new sign. If it's one rub just from this year, even though it looks like a nice rub, it's not as valuable as going into an area where you think there's a nice funnel, and then you go in there and you find 30 old rubs that extend back for a decade or more. That's a valuable area. So and you're really trying to eliminate a lot of acres at one time.
So do you ever hunt small tracts of public?
I used to growing up, and that was down in the Pontiac, Clarkston area of lower Michigan. And they were all, sometimes you're hunting behind someone's house. It was just a small public land tract that a lot of people were hunting. And I enjoyed hunting those. One was Pontiac Lake Recreation Area. And it's not like I'm going to draw a magnet of people there, because anybody that's down in that area, there's millions of people, and they're, if you're hunters, you probably hunted out that way at some point, or if you've hunted public land. But I really enjoyed hunting those places. And one of my favorite tactics was I hunted behind houses a lot. And so I'd find areas where you could get in. There's lots of subdivisions around, or dead-end streets. And you find someone that on one of those dead-end streets that you could access behind their land and get into areas that other people had to walk 3/4 mile or a half mile to get into. And then at the same time, you found that a lot of those backyards were full of ornamental shrubs or gardens or flowering trees, bushes, whatever it might have been, that attracted deer every single night. Apple trees, crabapple trees. And so I hunted a lot of movements on and out of private lands on the public land.
So, I was doing some map scouting last night, actually, and when I was looking, when you look, say you're going to go out of state or even in state, and you start looking, and I have Casey and I use the OnX mapping system quite a bit, and so you've got you can see a lot of public when you look in a wide view at a state, whether it's big or small. How are you narrowing down the actual pieces that you want to really go in and boot scout?
That's a good question, because you do look at 10,000 acres, you can narrow down the habitat. Now, what I'm also doing is I'm looking for blocks of timber that are away from roads. And so when I hunted down in Ohio, where I chose to hunt down there was basically, I chose those areas, and I can tell you a mistake I made down there like that too, but I chose areas, the one was 4 by 6 miles. And I can honestly say that in 6 years, I actually hunted there in that location for 4. So those 4 years, I saw another hunter one time back. I'd walk in 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's just pure walk. And so you had the place to yourself. But the mistake I made was that down in that area, and I capitalized on it 2 years ago, and it kind of hurt me last year, the same thing, was that when we first hunted that area 6-7 years ago, there were somewhat young clear cuts. They were 2, 3, 4 years old. And that was like the optimum time to see deer numbers. We saw 25 in one day. I personally saw 25 in one day. And as the years went by, you saw fewer and fewer deer to the point there was hardly any. And it was just because those deer migrate to the fresh clear cuts. 2 years ago, I hunted by a couple semi-fresh clear cuts. They're probably in that 3-4 year old range, and shot a nice buck. We had probably about 8 to 10 shooters on camera, over 4 cameras in a given area. And then last year hunting there, I had a friend telling me that he was seeing the same buck 3 miles away that we had on camera all fall the year before, and it was right adjacent to fresh clear cuts that were only a year old. And so, I know that now. It's kind of, they move to the fresh food. So if you have big public land tracts that have rotational cuttings in the timber, say a state parcel, then, I really like looking for remote areas that I can get in and have a place kind of to myself, but then also getting in near those clear cuts or food sources, if those are present in the area, is really important. Or in the case of where I hunted up north in the wilderness swamps of Michigan, I was looking for those habitat changes because there were 0 cuttings out there. So it really narrowed it down where deer were actually at. So.
How long would you figure that the process of narrowing down properties takes, and then maybe the process of understanding if that property is something you want to hunt after putting some boots on it?
I think that the biggest thing, it doesn't take a lot of time by air. If you're looking at aerial photos or aerial maps, and you're looking at roads and road access, you're looking for remote areas, that in itself narrows down the parcels. But in the case of Ohio, where we're hunting with the clear cuts, you have to throw into those 1 to 3 year old clear cuts and kind of X out everything else too. And so by the time you do that, you could take, a state public land area that's 65,000 acres and narrow it down to 500 to 1,000 acres of land that you want to go take a look at. So then it's a matter of getting into that area and seeing if there's actually deer sign, and seeing, especially if it's 2, 3 year old clear cut, seeing what kind of signs around, how you can get in and out. Some of the topo map areas don't relate directly to the new clear cuts, so you're not sure. You might get into an area and it's the flat area that you wanted to hunt or bench is just a big clear cut and you can hardly get in there. It just gets so thick by year 5 or 6 that you can't walk through it. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, you really need to put that formula in play. X out as many acres that you can that are common habitat. That's all the same. It's all mature. There's not a potential of food, big pine thickets. And then it actually takes that time to get there. And I would say, honestly, it really isn't something that takes weeks and weeks. Like if you're going to do that in a northern setting in the upper Midwest, or you're going down to a state like Ohio or Indiana on public land, I think that you could spend a couple weekends, all day Saturday, maybe part of Sunday or part of Friday, and after a couple weekends have a really good game plan of what's going on if you stick to the script. You don't get misled by, a bunch of sign just a quarter mile from a road that, a lot of people are going to be hitting once it gets to deer season, because you could be really, really disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So on those clear cuts that you were talking about, we live, or not really live, but we have opportunity to hunt areas like timber harvest areas and stuff like that. Much of the South has that, as well as, up in the, far northern reaches. But a lot of clear cuts are just big squares taken out of mature timber. So there's not a lot of variation in the edges or, defined habitat features involved with them. So, I understand that they're huge, food sources for a whitetail. But how do you go about actually hunting a clear cut minus just setting up on the edge and hoping one walks by?
And I guess it really depends on what's going on the outside of that too. If it's all the same for miles, that's one thing. But there's got to be some change within there, whether it's just even a 10-foot change in topography, a small creek a half mile away, something that you're looking for, not just in the 200 to 300 yards that surround that clear cut, but what's a half mile away and what's 3/4 mile away. Because you find in big areas like that, and I see this in the UP of Michigan where you have big timbered areas, the deer typically, so let's say it's 50-50 ag and you're in southern Wisconsin, southern Michigan, central Indiana, central Illinois, Iowa. You might find that a daylight movement of deer might boil down to 200 to 400 yards, where you have does that are sandwiched up against food sources if there's cover, and then behind that somewhere are medium age bucks, and then you have mature bucks that are further in remote areas. It's just what they choose. And that whole movement from buck bedding to a food source might be 200 to 400 yards. I find you get in those remote areas, and it could be even a big wooded area in Pennsylvania or Kentucky. But when you get up north, and it could be in the state of Texas too, that those movements could be more narrowed down to 3/4 mile to a mile, where it's not just that you can't sandwich. The deer used to space, they take the space. In northern Ohio, I've been on a client property where client has 26 acres, the neighbor has 20 acres, and between the two of them, they have the most acreage within 2 miles in any direction. It's just all open, flat ag. So in those cases, you have 40 deer sometimes that are sandwiched into a 20-acre parcel. And where you couldn't do that, even if you had great habitat, bedding area work, food plots, you couldn't do that in northern Michigan, for example. Those deer just are used to moving a lot more and not being, really pounded on top of each other in a cramped space.
Yeah. Jeff, for many years of my life, I've been wondering what advantage we have over the ag-laden Midwest, and I finally found it now that you've told me. It's because the deer move further in daylight. There actually is something, so that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think so. It's the problem is it's more of a needle on a haystack sometimes, but I think it helps protect deer and advance them to the next age class, and it can spread out your hunting opportunity too. You're not just honing on this little 20, 40 acre parcel.
Sure, yeah. And Tyler and I talk about that all the time. Like, since we're public land hunters for the most part, it's kind of tough, and we can't put up feeders, or we can't plant food plots, or what have you, do a lot of habitat improvements. But with the thing that we do have going in our advantage is the fact that we can cover a deer's whole home range if we want to, and really try to figure that buck. There's a lot of people who don't have that advantage on their small private parcel or their ag field or whatever it is,
That's that's a great observation, because, boy, it's a lot of fun when you go into big public land tract and kind of think that, they're feeding over here, they're bedding over here, they're moving in between, or they have multiple beds, and you can try to figure out the whole scenario. And if it's remote enough, you don't have a lot of hunter influence. I've seen, though, there's, some really good bucks down in the Arkansas area. I've been down to Arkansas for clients and seen it down there. So I can't tell you how many clients of mine have land adjacent to, right next to, or in close proximity to public land. And it's amazing the deer that are out in some. I would never go back and hunt those areas by those clients and dishonor that relationship, but at the same time, there's some really good deer on public land that I could bring people right to that are right next to private land parcels. Cool. So when people say they don't have hunting areas, I always kind of shake my head, because if you want to drive a couple hours, there's a good piece of public land somewhere.
Sure,
usually in some direction. So
we'll talk later off there about that other part there.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll just get your pen and paper and number it. I'll list them out for you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the cool things about it, though, is that it's just a big tract of land, and you have the opportunity to roam, and quite honestly, like you said, it's just enjoyable to know that I have the opportunity to target this buck at every aspect of his life.
Right.
But you have to figure out how to actually accomplish that. And sometimes it's really tough because, for instance, a guy with a private parcel might have, and a clearing, whether it's clear cut, ag, whatever, CRP field, and have, a finger of timber that just runs right through it. Just the standard funnel pinch that everybody hopes to be able to hunt during the rut, right? And they can do that. You find that on a public piece. Most of the time, there's going to be 3 old deer stands, a couple trail cameras, and some flagging tape there. So it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yes, people kill deer there in a place like that every year, but you have to be good. If you want to be successful, you have to be good at finding the funnels that you can't see from an aerial, or that are very hard to see from an aerial. So do you have,
or hard to get to?
Yes, yeah, that's true too. On that what'd you say, 4x6 earlier? I'm sure that scenario could be played out there. But what strategies do you have, or what type of funnels are not so apparent or really hard to see from an aerial that maybe you might even have to get your boots dirty to find?
Well, and see that boils down to, because I've hunted tracks that are all the same. Mm-hmm. So it's basically, there's no definition of habitat. It's just rolling topography, maybe big hardwoods. And then it boils down to, you're kind of trying to slot yourself in between the hunting access points. So I like to go find the remote areas in between, and you're almost looking for other hunting locations. So I really like looking for, like, for example, when I get out of my car in the UP, I would be very, very careful at what direction I went for crushing ferns. Like I'd really try to slip through the ferns. I didn't like breaking any ferns, because anybody that went to that spot could tell where I went. I didn't leave any flagging ribbon. And so I'm looking at that stuff for everyone else. And so that's one of the things I'd scout in the off season was, where am I finding old blinds? Where am I finding old hunter access routes, crushed ferns, boot prints? I've made sand traps. So let's say you cross a beaver dam in the UP of Michigan, and then you're getting into a big patch of spruce. I'd make some sand traps just to tell me which way people went. And then by that, you can tell kind of like, is this a father and son hunting back there, a husband and wife? You look at boot prints. So I love looking at boot prints in that case. And you're basically just trying to tell, without it being during the season, where people are scouting, where they've been before, and then you're narrowing down the pockets where people aren't. So I'm not one that's ever hunted someone else's blind location. I'm more the type, I see a blind that someone might be hunting, or a location they had a tree stand on and they cut some limbs down, and I just go the opposite direction. And so I'm constantly looking for a spot that is untouched, kind of going back to that principle of hunting pressure is the lowest hole in the bucket. And if I can find a spot where everything else being equal has the least amount of hunting pressure, then I'm going to find a pocket of really good deer hunting, regardless if the habitat's all the same everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm. So can you explain the sand trap thing a little bit more? Because I don't know if I've ever heard that, and it sounds very intriguing.
So one of the things I love doing is making mock scrapes for deer. Mm-hmm. And the deer that's coming through, you can tell sometimes there's a broken hoof, broken toe, and you can tell that particular buck size of a track that you see over and over again. You might see even a rotation of them. So I love doing that with whitetails, but at the same time, with people, I've had areas where, again, I cross a beaver dam and I make a sand trap this way or that way, just so that when they get out of that constriction, and let's say you're crossing a creek somewhere, you're coming down a road, and then you're going down a point, and by keeping an open surface of sand or exposed soil for someone to step in, then you can actually see, you might go in a location like that, it's loaded with footprints, people. And you go down to your trail camera that's, in your stand location that's still there, and it explains a lot of why there's no deer in the area, because someone's been hunting it over and over again. Mm-hmm. So you're basically, it's one more tactic to try to keep an eye on who's hunting in the area, no different than driving over to around the block, around the neighborhood, to see who's, which weekend hunters up and visiting their cabin on that parcel and not hunting for the weekend, that you could maybe cheat to that side of the parcel, knowing that a buck only comes over to your area when the neighbors are on their land hunting for that weekend. It might be Saturday, Sunday afternoon. So really it's giving your ability to look at tracks in a spot where you otherwise wouldn't be able to see any tracks going out into the woods. Mm-hmm. Kind of hunting people.
Right. Yeah.
a little bit, just keeping tabs on them.
It's the most dangerous game.
Yeah, exactly. Which again goes back to, you're trying to find an area that has the least amount of hunter impact and hunter pressure. You find those little pockets where everything else is even as far as habitat goes, and I think you really tilt the odds in your favor.
Mm-hmm. How long does pressure affect an area in your experience?
I go to a lot of client properties, and this could extend to public land, I believe, too. But, I have clients that tell me they just saw a diminishing deer herd. The season opens October 1st. They have a couple good hunts. It gets into gun season in the middle of November. By the time they get into muzzleloader in December, they're not seeing a deer. And then we're out there in the end of February, and not only do we see dozens of beds, but we see fresh rubs, we see deer hair, lots of pellets, and we actually push deer off the property. And I feel like there's a 3 to 4 week of forgiveness where deer will forget your intrusions after 3 to 4 weeks, or it doesn't really have much of an impact. But the problem is that, especially on private land, hunters are hitting their land every weekend, every other weekend, and it never gets to a point where the deer can experience those weeks of forgiveness where you haven't been on the property. And then all of a sudden, the month after the season ends, there's deer out there. And I think that happens on public land. And so, that being said, if I have a great area that I want to hunt for the rut on public land, and I know there's someone going in there hunting, I go to one of my other spots, because I look at it like we really don't have enough time for that to settle down. And public land's a little different, though, because sometimes there's some really hot saddles or points, basically funnels, that you could sit in almost every day. And because the deer are used to moving over such a large area with a lot of woods, that might be spooked out for a buck here, a buck there over a 3 or 4 day period if someone's hunting there. But you always have that next buck that might be coming from a mile away, that's none the wiser, doesn't know there's been any intrusion because he's got such a large home range during the daylight, compared to that small 40 to 80 to 120 acre parcel that can be buggered out, for a month at a time, and they're not going to be on that parcel during the daylight.
I was kind of interested because we have a spot on public that we have hunted in the last couple of years, and in 2016 it was covered up with bucks, had a lot of bucks, and we didn't have cameras in there until November. It had a ton of bucks on it, and then we hunted it quite a bit, and it kind of had kind of a lull towards the end of the year. We weren't seeing as much deer movement, and then that summer, which was last summer, we put trail cameras up, and there were bucks back in there like crazy, good bucks. And then we hunted it this year a few times, and in November we had a couple different groups of people move in at different times, and they always came in on the wrong wind. They basically walked in downwind, and we really saw the movement suffer on our trail cameras in the end of the year. And so I was assuming that deer this summer would move back in there, and we haven't really seen. We've got decent amount of does in there moving through, but we don't have the bucks moving in there like they were. And so I just was interested. Yeah.
Well, in one of the things too, like I see that they do, like I have clients all the time. I have clients with dirt bike tracks, horse riding trails, things like that, and they do really well. My turnkey partner Ross, he goes to a lot of properties and cuts, puts water holes in, switchgrass, whatever, and they. I have people like that are working on their lands from January to August, and then they stay off them and then have a great hunt. So I don't really see that a lot of times where you're hunting here and it's pushing. But what I do see is like summer food sources change a lot. And so if you don't have summer food sources adjacent to those same areas you saw them in the past, then those summer food sources a lot of times drive the deer, and the same with fall. Like I'm seeing on public land where, it's great hunting this year, and then we see 10 different shooter bucks or 8, and then the next year you're getting a picture of one. And it wasn't, I don't feel it was the people. I feel it was the habitat change. So those clear cuts have moved and just brought the deer, to a different location.
Right.
Not to mention the hunting pressure does make a big difference, but in an area like that, you could usually, the deer just get bumped around. You can go a half mile over here and they're fine, or this half mile, there's a core area where there's really no hunting pressure, but I find they're just gone.
Yeah.
It's probably food related.
That was kind of my next question was, how far does a buck typically move in like heavy timber or heavy cover?
And what I see is they move a lot more during the daylight. They're willing to move a lot more in the daylight to get from high quality bedding, and typically on public land, because a lot of times on public land it's not that well managed as far as that there's clear cuts everywhere, and there's hardwood regeneration everywhere, that there's a diversity of habitat, or that there's a lot of edge. So whitetails are willing to move a great distance. I had a buck I was after, I think it was 2011. It was a real big 8-point out on public land. Nice mature buck. Ended up being close to 150 inches for an 8-point. So it was a big, big antlered buck. But I had hunters that I know and shared trail cam photos with me. They were getting pictures of them on their bait piles between midnight to 4 in the morning. And then I'm seeing them and then shooting them a couple days later at 10 in the morning, approximately a mile away. And I was out in his bedroom there, and that's it's almost like a barbell. He's out there, and then a mile away at night, he's going and hitting all those bait piles out on public land. Wow. And I was on public land in that case too, and I went in a completely different direction than those guys did. They came in the front side. I went all the way around to the back side, and I had to walk a long ways in, try not to, try to keep them from knowing there's a trail coming in. But in that case, they were moving. That buck was probably moving, I would guess, in that 3/4 mile to 1.25 mile range every single day.
Wow.
Going from his interior bedding where there's no people hunting, and then going back out to the food sources at night where there's a lot of hunting pressure.
And that's really, really good info right there. I have, for the last 18 months or so, known about a buck, and he's you and I talked earlier, and we don't chase monster deer in relativity to some these other people that are hunting in maybe the Midwest and such, but this is a nice deer for our area. And last year we hunted for him quite a bit. He lives on a public piece during the fall and the winter. The last 2 years we've seen him. In the summer, we had some issues finding him last summer, so we don't have any pictures of him last summer. And then up until this point, we don't have any pictures of him this summer. But I have daytime pics of him like all over the property, which is about 2 square miles. And despite like never having any pictures of him during March through October, I think he still lives on the property during the summer. He's all over the place in the winter, moving, cruising for does. I mean, you got any tips on how I find this deer before October, or just at least better yet, how do I kill him, this season?
Yeah. And I think, one thing, first off, for the summertime, it doesn't, from what I've experienced, unless they get bumped, deer really don't move a lot during the summertime. They really kind of shack up next to their favorite summer food source. They find, especially a buck, a big area with open airflow. They don't want to crash their velvet through a bunch of heavy, thick, regenerated timber that they would during the fall. So a lot of times their habitat requirements are a lot different than they need during the fall versus summer. And so, but on the other hand, they really love to hit. I don't know if you guys can use mineral licks down there.
We can't.
Okay. Yeah, we can't in Wisconsin where I hunt too, but that really, water holes and mineral licks are great places to find them during the summertime. And again, kind of thinking that you're looking for areas that really aren't as thick as they would use during the fall.
Yeah, it's thick bottomland like a lot of public is. There are definitely open areas, but I guess this is another thing that kind of perplexes me. But in the eastern half of Texas, we have lots of creeks and stock tanks and all this kind of stuff that, a lot of water sources, lakes, rivers, whatever. So how do I target that water during the summer?
Right.
How do I know that he's going to drink from this little pond or whatever, as opposed to that big creek or river system,
Yeah. And so that's kind of a non-factor too. One of the things I really like, during the actual hunting season with an individual buck is using trail cameras. Just to figure out his direction that he's coming from. And I basically, now you're getting a lot of daytime pictures, so I consider that he's probably bedding fairly close. He might move a half mile or a quarter mile, but once you narrow down the direction he's coming from, and you assume that if you're seeing him at this point going into this food source in the evening, and he's an hour before dark, you can kind of, to me, narrow down a pretty close proximity to his bedding area. And so what I'm doing is, the bedding areas are the most critical location that you can discover for a whitetail. And I'm looking at I don't care the actual bed he's in. I care more about he's in this 5-acre area, this 20-acre area, because then I can go set up on him in the morning and wait for that buck to come back to me in that exact location, and then get a shot at him. And so, there might be a potential of a lot of different bedding areas, but there's bucks that are just coming in after dark that are nocturnal, and I have a lot of clients, and I hear from a lot of hunters where they're setting up on that buck in late October looking for a pre-rut in the Midwest, and that buck is coming in the middle of the night, and he's telling you he's a mile away. And so he's got his does with him over there. He's not going to be to your land until he breeds a couple over there over about a week period of time or a 10-day period of time, and then he's going to come over. So he's kind of been telling you, and you don't get a lot of pictures of him that way too. So that's that buck that you only hunt till in the middle of the rut, after he's bred a couple does in his own area, and he's going to wander a long ways. And I know your rut is spread out a lot more down there, and so it's a little bit different there. But really working on those bedding areas and trying to find a direction he's coming into, either by rubs, scrapes, sign that you think is his because it's popping up in the same area every year and you've seen him in that area, or you're using trail cameras in combination with the sign too. It's kind of like, I know hunters that don't use trail cameras on their private land because they don't want to spook deer, and to me you have such an unfair advantage over someone. I'd love for all my neighbors to please not use trail cameras. That would be the perfect scenario, because they can give you so much intel as far as if that's a non-core buck and he's hanging a mile away. He's a core buck and he's within a couple 100 yards, 300 yards of your food sources every single day. They tell you direction. A lot of times if you have 80 to 120 acres and you're just using 6 or 8 cameras around the outside of that parcel, you're really learning a lot about the bucks that are moving on and off your property, where they're coming from and how close they are.
Yeah. So I didn't really explain this very well, but a lot of the daytime pictures we have are not necessarily during our rut, but he's definitely following or cruising for does, I feel like, in these pictures. Right. So during the fall and winter months. And they are sometimes like far from each other. So like
during the same day.
Well, like it seems like he'll stay in an area for 2 or 3 days, and then like when we checked in just postseason, or I guess February, we checked our cameras in that area, and he would be in this area for like January. So I'm just making stuff up, but January 8th and 9th, and then you would see him a day later on a camera, say to the north, 600 yards or so, and maybe even more than that. And he's up there for 2 days or 3 days, and then he would be way over to the east for a couple of days after that, and it was just weird. It was making it really, really hard to put a pattern on him or to even.
That's pretty cool. Do you see that same pattern from south to north to east or direction? Because a lot of times what I found in like the big wilderness settings is that during the rut, mature bucks will cruise known doe family group areas.
This is why I'm asking you.
They're going from one to the next to the next.
That's
so
great.
It's kind of like, and it's kind of like you get pictures in one, you get all excited, but he's already been there. And he might be there for 3 or 4 days, and then he's moving 3/4 mile over there to scan that doe family group. So it's almost like you see him here, you hunt over there, waiting for him to come to you. And because a lot of times in those big wilderness areas, the doe family groups are scattered. A little pocket here, a little pocket there.
He's trying to kind of hit the doe family groups for a couple of days, and he's got. You think he could have a particular like route that he runs throughout the rut?
I definitely feel that way, and especially when you don't have hunter interference in between, where he's hitting this location, he can freely go to that situation or that location over there, and then come back. And I think he's still would have when he's calm, when he's wore out, when he's in between, the rut periods. Like we have a pretty solid early November rut to mid-November, and then we have a smaller that would be 15% in early December. Well, in between that time, I think he goes back home, and the end of October he's at home. But then you see him during those rut periods where he's cruising from woodlot to woodlot, and I think he just knows where those are, and he goes and checks them out.
Yeah. Man, that's really good advice. I've been posing this question to the last few guests, a similar question, kind of like, how do I? And I know it's so vague because, we're not talking to people that are familiar with where we hunt and this and that. Right. So it's property specific, but that's really good advice. I'm literally cannot wait. Not to be rude, but to get off this phone call and start looking at my pictures and try to put a pattern together. So
yeah, because what's interesting. This is something that I've shot about half of my oldest bucks, most mature bucks, where they give you just a handful of pictures over a 2 or 3 year period of time, and they're obviously living on someone else's property. And it's kind of like if you look at those pictures, he's telling you when he's going to be there next. It's not to the date, but it's kind of like, we get into that mid-rut period of time in November, and I'm hunting a buck that's from a mile away. And I know the direction. You could look at the aerial photos. He's over that way. You might even see him that way during the summertime. And you might even have friends telling you that they're seeing him often, during close to daylight. And then you come to this rut window, let's say in our area, November 2nd to November 15th. And you look at that chunk of time and you look at the weather. Now, there might be several days that are unseasonably warm, 30-mile-an-hour winds. And it's not to say you can't shoot that buck during those days, but you're basically playing poker, and you're saying these 3 days out of these 12 days, that's a really good hand. These other days are medium to poor. And so you're really counting on those 3 days that he's going to be on your property. And if you actually go back, I've done this with a lot of clients, and you look at your weather data, look at historical weather trends, you can see that, in general, there's a lot of deer, a lot of bucks that are shot on really good weather days. And you can look at your own bucks going back. I mean, you can plug in numbers for decades going back and see when you shoot those. So that pattern, and then you combine that pattern, whether you think he's going in between doe family groups or he's connecting to a food source every single day, and this is bedding area he's coming from. But when you put the weather together with, and you look at those factors, to me it narrows it down where there's sometimes I've shot a buck that's a mile away, and I've went and sat in that stand one time, and it seems like a needle in a haystack, but it's kind of like he's told you for 2 or 3 years that he's going to be there during a good day during this 10 days. Narrowed down, you only have 1 or 2 or 3 days that you can shoot him on. That he's going to be there.
That's awesome.
So, using the weather and following those patterns, to me, really, of course, your weather's different down there as far as and it's all relative. We get unseasonably warm temperatures, but let's say we drop from 75 would be 30 degrees, above norm, and let's say it dropped to 55, which is still 10 degrees above norm during that time of year. It's a 20-degree drop. Mm-hmm. And there's cold pressure air that came in. So I'm going to hunt those days and, play my cards on those days. And if you relate it to whatever patterns of that buck you're after, then to me, you have a really good chance of shooting them. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be hunting out there just saying, I got to go after this buck every single day. Less is more. And that's another thing too. Wrote an article a few years ago where you can shoot more deer from the couch. And basically just saying that, literally to me, you burn out your best days by over hunting a land and not being patient, to where you have that 10 out of 10 day and opportunity that's come up, but now you've made it a 1 or a 0 out of 10 because you've over hunted it for the week before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
And so that day just never comes.
I don't know if I can hear that enough, because I don't think it'll ever go completely through my thick skull. But
it's hard.
It is tough. And honestly, a lot of the places that we hunt are 1 buck counties, or only one large buck over 13. We have antler restrictions in a lot of places.
Right.
So it's really tough whenever, say, you've got like this buck that you have your heart set on, and then it's a very tough decision to say, okay, I'm going to go hunt a different spot and be willing to shoot another deer. That's hard to tell yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and then at the same time, you have, I'm fortunate I can hunt just about any day I want during the season. And, of course, most hunters aren't like that. And so I'm looking at, like, you have this opportunity to hunt Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and you have that time off. For someone to pull back and wait till Saturday night or Sunday morning and not hunt all day Friday, Saturday morning is really tough to do. But that's, to me, I found value when I had to manage my time a little bit more for time off, that I found a lot of value that I could find a Wednesday night or a Thursday morning that was much more valuable than that following weekend because the weather was bad. So I literally would drive 7 hours to hunt Wednesday night and a Thursday morning and go home and not hunt on the weekend.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you. I have a semi-flexible schedule. I still have to work quite a bit.
Semi-flexible,
yeah. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I'm not saying I don't work. But
No,
I work around the hunting. Yeah,
exactly. I do construction, and I think, as a side note, if you really want to dedicate, a large portion of your wife, you're
thinking your wife.
Yeah, exactly. Large portion of your life. Yeah. I hope she didn't listen to that part. But,
exactly.
If you want to dedicate a large portion of your life, and you're serious about this whitetail stuff, like you really are committed, finding an occupation that allows you to do that has really blessed me, because I'm right there where you're talking about. I can work a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon doing construction and then be able to hit that cold front on a Thursday when I need to.
Right.
And
that's really important. And when you're doing that, you're leaving more time that you traditionally would go hunting for your family.
Yes, exactly.
So you're looking at, like, I'm hunting this Wednesday, but at the same time that frees up to do this on Saturday night with the spouse and with friends and everything else. So I look at, like, it's a pretty good way to manage, not, keep you from overhunting and burning out not only your tree stands and your land and the deer you're after, but your family.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've talked a lot about the deer that we're after, but since you've had, a ton of experience on public land stuff, I wanted to ask you more about how many flyers have you shot? How many deer have you never seen, never knew existed? You were hunting other target bucks, but all of a sudden, a deer walks into your life the only time he's been on that property that you know of, and he's a shooter. How often does that happen for you?
That happened a lot in Pennsylvania because, I might go in there and you're hunting by rub and scrape and remote area and your access, everything, but you don't know what that buck looks like. And then when one comes through, it's a mature buck. You shoot it as that same buck. Who knows? And I've done that in the UP in Michigan too, where you're going into an area that is an outstanding funnel, and you don't find any sign of people going back there. So you're hunting this core area. You sit there for a day or two and you shoot this really nice buck, and you never saw him. You're just looking for a mature buck, and that happens so much more on public land than private land. Because public land, you're just looking for a great funnel and an opportunity to shoot a mature buck, where private land, you're looking for more specific bucks, and you get to know all the bucks, and it's rarely that you see a flyer. I saw a flyer last year on private land in Wisconsin, and he went by in a misty, rainy morning. It was in the mid-30s and misty, and so it's one of those where when you took your hands out, even just use a camera or anything, it was just freezing. And a little wind. I'm on top of a knoll. I'm actually 400 feet in elevation up, and I had a 5-year-old go by that I'd never seen before, and I just looked at him and didn't really recognize him, and I got my bow ready and didn't shoot. And then of course we get lots of video and pictures of, and I honestly should have shot him. He's a really, really nice buck, but he was a flyer. Now he will definitely not be a flyer next year, but he was one that I didn't recognize at all, and he had some very unique characteristics.
That's cool. So what do you think it is that makes those deer come into existence?
I think a lot of times they're moving their core fall range based on hunting pressure and lack of food or lack of cover. The lack of cover a lot of times has to do with hunting pressure. So they get pushed out, and now they come into a friendly area and they stay there. And what I see with those bucks and those type of bucks, especially on private land, and that could happen on public, but they get pushed into an area for lack of food, lack of unpressured bedding area or cover, daytime cover. They get pushed into that area, or they get bumped around because you have 4, 5, 6-year-old bucks in the area, and here's a 2 or 3-year-old buck that doesn't quite have a space. sometimes those bucks are the hardest to pattern because who knows where they're going to end up. They get bumped around by older bucks. And then all of a sudden this buck comes in as a 3-year-old onto your land, and then as he ages, we had one aged to 8 where we hunt in southwest Wisconsin, another one aged to 7. And it seemed like those older bucks, the older they got, the more defined they were in their home range, and it was small. Like that area during the daytime kept them safe, and so it's almost like, you see this flyer, and all of a sudden that flyer that's 2 or 3 years old becomes, that resident buck, and he just enjoys the fact that he has fall food, fall cover, and it's unpressured. And I think that's how a lot of times you can build a private land property, and experience an unfair proportion of harvest of the local mature bucks, just because you're offering the one spot that does have true fall cover, true fall food, and most importantly, you're covering the lowest hole in the bucket, which is that unpressured core area where a high percentage of land that he can call home and get away from all your neighbors.
Yeah, I definitely can see that, and my hypothesis was that of hunter pressure too, because we see it on public land a lot, and you almost, I can't say this for a fact because I haven't looked at the pictures in a while, but you can almost see it on your trail cameras after a big hunting weekend, like say, a November weekend. You'll have new bucks pop up because people were in there that weekend moving stuff around, mucking things up, and it caused them to move into your spot. And something we've even noticed is that deer, bucks especially, will move into like less than desirable areas because it's the spot where no one's going. It's like a marginal CRP area, or something where it's just a little bit of plum thicket right here in the middle of a pasture or something, but it's just the one place that nobody goes, and it doesn't have to be the greatest habitat or the greatest cover, but it is the one hiding spot,
Right. Yeah, and that can, even like in private land, it can be a pretty small area. And like to think about, everyone, most people in the country, they have, neighborhood parks. In suburban areas, they have really small areas that hold an incredible amount of deer and big giant bucks, and they're simply there because people can't hunt them. And there's no water holes, bedding areas, food plots, anything. It's just the fact that they're there in this 20-acre little chunk of habitat in the middle of millions of people, just because you can't hunt them.
Yeah.
And that to me underscores, imagine taking that same scenario and you put it on 40 to 80 acres. You get a high percentage of that land being efficient and working for you, where you're not producing your hunting pressure during the hunting season, and you're letting deer have that, 55 out of 80 acres that they can call their own, that you don't really get your scent, your sight, your sound into. And you add food plots in there, and you add bedding area creation, travel corridors, mock scrapes, whatever it might be. And now you take that little 20-acre neighborhood scenario and you magnify it and put it on steroids, basically, and you produce it in 55 acres out of 80, or even 25 acres out of 40, whatever the percentage is. And you have this hot spot that draws in a lot of the mature bucks in the area. And then, of course, if you're not managing the doe herds, and you're not you're putting the conditions together that create a giant doe herd, then that can take up a lot of space, and those bucks won't stay on the land during the day. But that's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, sure. It's crazy to me how smart they are sometimes, and how they can figure that stuff out. And what's also crazy is how dumb we can be sometimes,
Well, yeah, we're not. Yeah, we can be the world's greatest predator, and we can be not.
And we can be a guy
the world's greatest predator.
A guy walking around with a stick in the woods, right?
Yeah, you think about it. Like there's many times you can go to a stand, and if it's a noisy stand, you can climb. So here you got to that stand without spooking any deer, and then just the noise from that tree stand, whether it's a climber, a squeaky ladder stand, or portable stand, and these deer can hear you 100 yards away or 200 yards away getting in there, and on a 40-acre parcel, it's only 440 yards wide. And so a lot of times you're not only spooking the deer that are on your land, but off your land too. And so you can create a nocturnal herd in a nocturnal parcel really quick just by not being quiet, let alone everything else, scent management and site management, everything else too.
Yeah, and so on that note, and you may have already answered it, but since you've been to so many public parcels and been to so many places doing consulting and it sounds like you really put an emphasis on scouting people as much as you do whitetail. What's the biggest mistake that you do see people making when they're going into like a heavily pressured public piece?
I think it's not, hunting pressure is, public land is one thing because you can get into unpressured whitetails and have a good hunt. But then not managing your scent in and out or while you're on stand. So I like hunting absolutes, meaning that, I'm looking at, if I'm going to hunt this area, I'm going to hunt on this side of the bench or on this side of the point, because I don't think that deer are going to come in that area. And so my scent can be contained. Maybe in the UP, Michigan, I hunted by a lot of beaver ponds. I blew my scent out over the pond. And so I might have my favorite stand on the northwest side of the pond, but if I didn't have northwest winds that was blowing back over the pond, then I'd hunt over with south winds on the south side. Even though that south side didn't produce a lot of bucks for me, I didn't want to, leave my scent cone unmanaged. And so I think a lot of people have the assumption that if you're using those OnX or keeping your clothes ultra clean, that you can just go hunt anywhere. Mm-hmm. And that's, to me, what I found, especially as the bucks age to 4 or 5. And it could be, in what I've seen, that's all the same. It doesn't matter if it's 4 or 5-year-old in Michigan or 4 or 5-year-old in Wisconsin or 4 or 5-year-old in Iowa. They all pretty much act the same as far as they're pretty elusive, and but really not managing your impact in and out. And part of that, we all think of scent, but sound is just as important.
Mm-hmm. Where we hunt, we don't really have, most of the time, we don't have a lot of defined trails in the areas we hunt a lot of times. So they're more like filter areas where the deer, like, they're going to go through this 50 or 100-yard stretch right here.
Yeah.
But there's not really a great trail. I mean, you can see where deer have walked, a group, maybe a doe family group have walked, but not really a trail. So, when you're bow hunting or you're having to, even if you're gun hunting and it's thick and you're going to have close range shot, how are you picking the right tree to hang in?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a good question because, again, so there's a couple scenarios. Let's say I'm hunting the top of a draw, and this draw might drop down 500 feet in elevation, and it's almost like just a big bowl around the top. And so there could be deer trail, 10 yards later, deer trail, 10 yards later, deer trail, all the way down for 100 yards across this flat bench section. What I'm doing is I might pinch off those upper 2 trails, sit right on that second trail, and then I'm watching 3 trails below me. And the point is, I don't want to ever get a deer downwind. And so I look at it like, even though that buck might cross 50 yards away and I can't get a shot, that I'm living to hunt that spot another day. Mm-hmm. I'm not spooking them. So I'm hunting that absolute. I'm going to the edge. And it's the same with a movement on a flat area where you have that 75 yards that deer could creep through. I'm going in as far as I think I can get away with and blow my scent out of that movement. And so, in knowing full well that there's a good chance that on half that movement I can't shoot that deer if they go through, but at the same time I can hunt that movement again another day. I'm not spooking them out. So I think the big temptation is to go in the middle and spook that movement out. And another thing too, if there's a mature buck that's going through that area, I find a high percentage of the time he's going on the downwind side of that movement because he can scent check every deer in there for 100 yards in, 150 yards in sometimes. And the whole reason you're hunting on that side is the whole reason he's in front of your stand 20, 30 yards and you can get a shot at him.
Right.
So again, it's just plain, I have a stand on either side of that movement and maybe on the one end for a different wind as they curve off a different direction. But I'm trying to be able to chip back and forth at that movement, maintain the movement. And then what I find, it just falls into a number of sits that you're going to shoot that buck that's in that movement you want, just because you're maintaining the movement, you're not spooking it out.
Mm-hmm. So if you're putting 1 or 2 trails behind you, are you assuming that you're high enough that your scent blowing downwind to those trails would go over the top of them, or?
Yeah, maybe like in the case of that upper draw where I'm hunting, but most of the time, if they're above you and behind you, they're going to spook. So what I might do is hinge cut a couple trees to block out those trails, so those deer either have to go all the way up into the field to go around me, or into an opening, or to an area they don't want to go during the daylight, or they're down in front of me. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to pinch that area off, or I'm just simply, if I can't do that, I'm hunting. Maybe that one trail is just below me, a foot in front of the tree. I can cover another couple trails, and I'm just hoping at some point that buck is on the high side of that draw or the outside of that movement in the flat woods, with the thought that he's in that location, scent checking the does in the inside, and he's on that downwind favor, just like I am, waiting for him in that location. And if it's on private land, then I'm making a travel corridor there for deer, so that there's an actual deer trail for them. And I'm opening up the canopy there so that they're actually getting more regeneration on that trail that I want them, that trail or two. I'm putting a mock scrape there to try to define the movement. And, if it's legal, I'm putting a water hole in the location like that in hill country. So I'm using as many different sweeteners of that movement that I can to make sure I'm drawing them to the outside of the movement, and I'm still not affecting the inside of that movement and destroying the movement itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jeff, I understand you're a busy man and a hard worker, and I just can't thank you enough for your expertise and your time tonight, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, you can maybe tell, but I get passionate about this stuff. I love whitetails.
Yep.
That's why I don't really hunt much else. And the fishing is a nice complement to it, a little bit of relaxation. But, I love the whitetails, mm-hmm. and trying to figure them out, and, continually asking why they do what they do. And it's, I love, I visit about 75 clients a year across the country, and I love visiting clients because it's every parcel you get to learn or reaffirm mm-hmm. something you've learned on another parcel. So it's fun. It's a fun journey, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys and discuss it because it's fun. I like talking this stuff.
Oh, me too. You got me fired up for sure. I'm ready to hunt right now. But
you got to let me know about that big one down there too.
Oh, I will.
That's pretty cool. I love that. I love that type of hunt, that one-on-one.
Yeah, for sure. It's not probably the best way to go about things on public land, but I'm going to try to give it one more try, Bramy, maybe this year. So. What's the best way for the listener to get connected with you or find out what you're doing, learn more from you?
Well, there's if they visit whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, that's my website, and from there, there's ways to contact. The contacts usually go through my wife, and so she kind of weeds some of the the emails out that we don't need to respond to, that kind of stuff. But she's pretty good at that, and then. From there, I have the books that I sell on my site. I have my books that I sell on Amazon. My YouTube channel is Whitetail Habitat Solutions. So that's another location, and I have links on there back to the site. And so all pretty easy to find. And then, a lot of times my clients, whether it's switchgrass or nocturnal box, trail cam strategies, if you put in search words and sentences into Google, you'll end up finding my stuff under Whitetail Habitat Solutions with all the articles I have out there. So that's another thing. A lot of times people just stumble into me. So,
well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We will link to all that in the show notes below. So if you're listening, please go visit that. Yeah. And Jeff, good luck this year. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing back. I love those kind of stories, and
sure,
you guys have a big passion for this stuff, so I can fully appreciate what you guys are trying to do. So
awesome.
Best of luck.
Thank you. Well, we'll be talking to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Well, I pretty much feel like I know everything there is to know about whitetail now.
Well, I'm glad he was able to impart that knowledge with me, and I'm pumped now.
Yeah.
Because, deer making scrapes where we're at right now, rut action is actually starting. We're starting to see deer, bucks, not tolerate each other's presence, and it's about to be that time, dude.
Yeah, I know. It's like we're on. I mean, any day it can happen right now. You know what I mean? As far as just it's a good enough time of the year at this point that it's you got to feel good every time you go in the woods. You got to feel like you got a chance. And speaking of scrapes, I did a mock scrape right next to my stand the other day, 2 days ago when I hunted, and there was tracks in it. The next day. I don't know if they used it. It looked like it was still wet, but then again, it's kind of been cool at night and it could have not evaporated or whatever, but it looked like something had used it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which I don't know, but
they walked
right through it. So anyway, it's that time of year, man. You're right. I'm pretty excited, and I think I probably need to get off this this headset pretty quick because I've got to get to bed. I got to eat still.
It's late. You got to get up early. I mean,
know.
your stand's already hung.
I know.
So.
How awesome is that?
Oh, my gosh, yes.
We did so many hanging hunts last year, and we'd already done a few this year. And,
Yeah.
like, I left my stand up, and this is going to be the second time I've hunted it since it's been left up. Oh, my goodness. It's the best, dude.
It's nice, man.
I mean,
it's going to be good.
I know. I want to continue to hang and hunt and try to develop to where I can actually kill a deer on a hanging hunt. Because, last year in Kansas, we killed on a hanging hunt, but it was like same thing, like 2 hunts later or whatever.
Yeah.
So we didn't technically hang it that morning. So you want to, like, there's a lot to being quiet and getting in there and doing this and that. It's hard to do. So I definitely would like to prove to myself that I can make that happen,
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, I need to get to sleep. Don't forget to give us a review on iTunes for the podcast, and that is your chance to win that Exodus Trek Trail camera. You have been warned one final time, and the next time you hear from us, you'll know who won, and hopefully it'll be you. Got good chances.
You do.
if you've done the review. So, anyway, thanks for those reviews, and remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.